I think we've got everything covered. 5:30.
All right. Vicki, are you recording?
Yeah.
Excellent. Welcome everybody to the July 13th combined Electric Toastmasters and Cascade Speakeasy Toastmasters meetings. Looks like we've got a couple of guests, and I can't wait to hear a little bit from them tonight. And in fact, I use an iPad, so it's hard for me to see everybody on here, but there's quite a list as I scroll through. Sergeant at Arms tonight, Rob Tidd. Rob's just exited his role as president. I'm happy to see that he's jumped right into a new role as Sergeant at Arms tonight. Rob, do you have a flag for us to salute?
I do. Thank you, Mr. President. If everyone would kindly mute themselves, and Vicki, I presume you've given me thank you. If you will all focus on my screen and say after me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Rob.
Hey, I'm on Jackie's Zoom program.
All right, at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our fill-in Toastmaster tonight, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. President. Theme of the meeting tonight is pandemic fatigue. Isn't that the truth? We've got two speakers tonight, and let's get right to it. Our general evaluator is Rob Tidd.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. This evening, we are very fortunate in that I have put together a crack team of professionals. And the reason I was able to do that is because we are the only two Toastmasters clubs in the world working together in tandem to bring you exciting speakers and speeches each and every week. So first, I would like to introduce our first evaluator this evening. Please welcome Christina Stepper.
Thank you. Tonight I will be evaluating Pat Whitfield's speech. This is speech 1 in the evaluation and feedback. The purpose of a project is for Pat to present a speech on any topic with which she'll receive feedback, then she'll apply that feedback to a second speech. She can redo this speech if she chooses, or she can apply the feedback to a different speech. The purpose of a speech is for her to present a speech and receive feedback from the evaluator. I will share my thoughts with Pat when called upon to do so. Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. Her speech is 5 to 7 minutes. Timer.
Great. Thank you, Christina. Next, I would like to introduce our next evaluator. He who collects baseball cards but hates baseball. Please welcome Ian Adams. Ian?
Thank you. I've actually got a baseball story for you I'll have to share later. On to my specific task for the evening. I'm going to be reviewing Jackie Gray's speech tonight. I'm really looking forward to this review. This will be her first speech as president of the Cascade Speakeasy Club. Tonight she'll be doing the research and presentation speech for her presentation mastery pathway. Her speech is 5 to 7 minutes. And tonight, what I'll be looking for is to see that Jackie is able to keep her audience engaged and interested in her speech as she presents her topic. Thank you. Rob.
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate that. Next, I would like to introduce the Hermitage of the English language. Please Welcome. I take that back. This is the timer. I am so sorry, Joyce. So this evening, you are going to be the timer, and please tell us what your role is going to be this evening. Please welcome Joyce Matheson.
Thank you. I need to look up thermitage because I went to public school and that word went over my head faster than a jet plane. As for my role, now that I'll get back to business, actually, before I get to my role, will somebody please text me what it means? I would really love to know. I'm too lazy to look right now. I get to time everyone to keep everyone on track so we don't fall asleep, or I might fall asleep. It's cherry harvest after all. For Pat and Jackie's speeches, it will be 5 to 7 minutes in length. At 5 minutes, we get the green roll. This is a pandemic theme for when we had to fight tooth and nail to get 2-ply. And never forget, 6 minutes, we go mellow yellow. And then at 7 minutes, we go pink. It's supposed to be red, but pink. For the table topics, at 1 minute, we go green. At 1 minute 30, mellow yellow. And for 2 minutes, we raise the red roll. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce. Now, I would like to introduce the thermitage of the English language. Our grammarian this evening, please welcome Vicki Chatterton.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be introducing the word of the day as well as listening to the speeches and listening for proper English as well as phrases or words that jump out at me. Tonight's word, and I've put it in the chat, is rhythmia, which is a noun meaning carefree lightheartedness. I felt that we needed a word that really lightened up our theme of pandemic fatigue. So let's see if we can get that into our speeches this evening. Thank you so much.
And Vicki, could you tell us one more time how you pronounce that word?
Yes, I've been practicing. Let me see. Rhythmia. Yeah.
Rhythmia. Okay. We are challenged this evening. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now I would like to introduce not the Wizard of Oz, but the Wizardman of Oz. Please welcome Mary Syrie. Mary?
I am the awe counter tonight. And what does the awe counter do? In this role, I will be noting words and sounds that any of our speakers use that are filler words and crutch words. Words could be and, well, so, you know, and the sounds are the usual or, ah. I'll also be listening for repetitions. And I will report back at the end of the meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. At this point in time, I would like to turn the meeting back over to our Master Toastmaster. Please welcome back Eric Stepper. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. Pat Whitfield has been in Toastmasters for a while now. She's probably one of the most attending participants. I see her at almost every meeting. She gets enthusiastic about it. She relishes her roles and she researches her roles. And she is probably a grade 1 grammarian over everybody. I always have to be on my A game when she's grammarian. Tonight, Pat is a level 1 of evaluation and feedback. Pat's topic is NCLB and ESSA, the alphabet soup of American education improvement. Pat will discuss the actions and effects of the No Child Left Behind and Every Student Succeeds acts on American education and education status in the world as a result. If you need more information, don't hesitate to contact her. Please welcome Pat Whitfield.
Thank you very much. Actually, Joyce gave me a wonderful segue into my topic when she talked about having gone to public school and she was never taught that particular word. So to talk about the NCLB and the ESSA, which sounds like an alphabet soup, NCLB stands for No Child Left Behind. ESSA stands for Every Child Succeeds Act. These are two federal acts impinging upon education in the United States. I'm going to go back 2 decades. 20 years ago, the United States was the world leader in education. Particularly, we were #1 in secondary and college education. Things have changed a bit. To come back to the alphabet soup, education, K-12 education, is a real privilege in the United States of America. It is free and everyone is entitled. It affects children. Yesterday, I was exposed to a word and a thought that I'd like you to hold in your heads. And it starts out also being a kind of an alphabet soup. It's Zapati Ingela. Zapati Ingela is a term that Maasai warriors use to greet people, and it means, how are the children? So as I speak, I want you to think about how were the children affected about this. So as I said, 20 years ago, the United States was a leader in education in the world, particularly in K-12. In the year 2002, 18 years ago, Congress passed the NCLB, known as the No Child Left Behind Act. It was intended to develop the assessment of basic skills. And it had quite a punitive overtone in that if districts did not assess accurately and democratically basic skills of all students, they wouldn't receive federal funding. It was based on 3 assumptions. 1, that the existing curriculum in schools was in fault. 2, that teachers and administrators weren't doing a very good job. And 3, that students were spending enough time in the classroom. Those were the premises. Now, there was a certain advantage to this particular act. It added structure to curriculum because standardized test results enabled educators to identify learning gaps for students in schools. So that was one advantage. Another one, it was intended to help disadvantaged students and give them an equal opportunity to learn. And thirdly, teacher qualifications were emphasized. Obviously, there was some concern that teachers weren't well qualified. And the final thing is that schools were required to report data. Okay. However, there were some disadvantages that developed over time. First of all, it changed the focus of schooling from learning to focus on test-taking skills. The residual effect of that was it created a limited range of knowledge to an entire generation of American children. They knew enough to pass the test, but they really didn't know the body of knowledge within that particular area of the curriculum. It never addressed the core issues behind poor student learning, and it was like an elephant in terms of responding positively to it. Very punitive. I'm not going to go into the details of what each punishment was, but there was a bad effect at 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and at 6 years, if they hadn't documented accurately, they would have to close the school and the children would have to go elsewhere. But the worst, and the thing that's bothered my conscience all of these years, has been it focused in such a narrow area of the curriculum, and enriching things like music, art, after-school activities fell by the wayside. I know when I was consulting in schools over a period of years in Utah and Arizona, I can't tell you how many teachers told me, Pat, teaching isn't any fun anymore. So as I said, to go back, in the year 2000, we were a leader in the world. In 2002, NCLB came into the picture. In 2009, we were by then 18th in educational performance of the 36 industrialized nations. In 2015, we were 38th out of 71 in math. We were 24th out of 71 in science. Later on, a few years later, they found out that the United States was 10th out of 48 countries in elementary learning, and that there were 7 countries that had higher scores than we did. In 2015, the National Association of Educational Progress, which is another thing that I've been involved in, said that only 40% of 4th graders, 33% of 8th graders, and 25% of high school students were proficient or advanced in math. Whoa. Well, let's come up to 2015. 2015, Congress decided to develop a new act, the ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act. And it was intended to give states more of a say in how they account for student achievement, particularly those who were disadvantaged. And disadvantaged identifies children of poverty, minorities, special education, and those that are not English language speakers. States could set their own general standards, but they had to be challenging, especially in math and science and reading. They absolutely must test every year in reading and math for 3rd through 8th grade, and the addition in middle school and high school was the addition of science. That was required. Each state had to identify 5 ways to measure school performance. And they had to set, quote, ambitious goals. Now, those weren't necessarily defined, but ambitious goals. And they had to identify struggling schools. They had to publish report cards. In other words, let the public know how they were doing. The 2 parts of it that I can applaud, and I haven't yet seen research to know to what extent this has gone on, is that schools would have the flexibility to teach children in different ways, and children would have the opportunity to document their performance, show what they know in different ways. In other words, not just by some kind of standardized test. I know one of the best examples I can give of that is, since I've worked a lot with American Indians, is that in the Bannock Shoshone School in Idaho, Native American children come from an oral culture. And instead of giving book reports, they were allowed to create murals, pieces of art that told the stories. And they also were encouraged to act it out. That's a wonderful example of an alternative way. So what's the importance of the ESSA? It affects all learners, not just a few who would succeed anyway. It does encourage states to expand personalized learning, and it required states to involve parents. Now, as I've shared all that information and data with you, I hope that you've been thinking, how are the children? So my parting words for you are Zapati Ingela. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Very interesting. Timer, can you put a minute on the timer, and let's give Pat feedback. And if you could type into the chat, right to Pat, that would be awesome.
Okay, 1 minute starting.
Thank you.
And 1 minute.
Thank you, timer. Please finish up your comments. According to Sir Francis Bacon, knowledge is power. In some cases, though, knowledge can be the difference between life and death, as in the case of two women whose lives briefly connected. Jennifer and Jasmine. Please welcome Jackie Gray with her speech titled Jennifer and Jasmine.
Jackie, unmute yourself.
Mute. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. There was a feeling of rhythmia in the air. Everyone could feel it. Jennifer grabbed her red solo cup, clinked it with Jasmine's, and took a big swig of cheap Trader Joe's wine. They were standing in the parking lot with their husbands of the parking lot to the St. Louis Convention Center. It was pretty nerdy, but they were all attending a board game convention. And as they stood there talking, getting to know one another, they just met that day, neither of these women realized that they were in the cycle of abuse. Jennifer had met her husband back in college, and they were college sweethearts. They fell madly in love, got married, and entered the pharmaceutical field. Jasmine, on the other hand, had waited until she was in her 30s because she wanted to make sure she found the right person. She also fell madly in love with her husband. But when they fell madly in love with their husbands, what they didn't realize was they were already in the honeymoon phase of the cycle of abuse. Now, the cycle of abuse was originally developed in 1979 by Lenore E. Walker, and it explains the patterns of behavior in an abusive relationship. So the first phase is the honeymoon phase. This is where they fell head over heels for their husbands. And there's one concept called love bombing that I would like to highlight in this particular phase because it captures the feeling really well, the rhythmia that sets in with the love bombing. This is a quote from a man named Lundy Bancroft, and he is an expert in the field of abuse because he started the first batters intervention classes in the United States. Here's what he says about love bombing. An abusive man is often unusually good at expressing an intensity of caring early in the relationship and can make you feel so special and chosen as if you were the only person who could ever matter so much to him. It's Lundy Bancroft. And once you're in the honeymoon phase, it will slowly start trickling into the next phase, which is the tension building phase, also known as the devalue phase. And that's what happened for both Jennifer and Jasmine. This is the covert part of the phase of abuse. Has anyone ever heard the term gaslighting before? That is one concept that underlies a lot of the tension building and devalue phase. And it comes from a movie back in the 1940s where a man marries a lonely but wealthy heiress. And then he has gaslights installed in the house. He hires a gentleman to dim the gas lights. And then when his wife comes to him and says, "What is going on? What do you think is going on with this?" He says, "I don't know what you're talking about." So it's very crazy making. I'm going to give you a definition of gaslighting that comes from a wonderful, wonderful Irish psychotherapist and expert in narcissistic abuse named Christine Louise de Caneville. Gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse used by narcissists in order to instill in their victims an extreme sense of anxiety and confusion to the point where they no longer trust their own memory, perception, or judgment. The intention is to, in a systematic way, target the victim's mental equilibrium, self-confidence, and self-esteem so that they are no longer able to function in an independent way. So these women had gone from the honeymoon phase where everything is wonderful to the confusion of the devalue and the tension building phase. And all that tension is going to lead into the third phase of abuse, which is the blow up explosion phase. Now, this phase can go on and on for a long time. It can be repeated. That's what a cycle is. And oftentimes when you get from the explosion phase going back into the honeymoon phase, that is the time where the abuser will be apologetic, say, I'll change, I'm so sorry. And over time, if the victim goes through that cycle over and over again, that tension will increase and heighten the intensity of that explosion phase. Both of the women, Jennifer and Jasmine, got out of the cycle of abuse, but it looked very different for each of them. Knowledge was definitely powerful and power for Jasmine. Jasmine ended up going to see a therapist who observed what was going on in the dynamics of her marriage and encouraged her to read books where she realized she was going through the cycle of abuse. So what happened with Jasmine is she left her husband, and after that, he started stalking her. He put a GPS tracker in her car and would show up in public places, making a huge scene. And she finally ended her cycle of abuse by going to stay at a domestic violence shelter for 2 months. Things were very different in Jennifer's case, though. Jennifer's real name is Jennifer Rothwell, and she indeed was based in St. Louis. She made local headlines when she went missing in November of 2019. And a week later, her cycle ended for good when her husband told police where they could find her body. There are several reasons I'm so passionate about people understanding the cycle of abuse. The first is that according to the National Institute of Health, 1 in 5 people in the general population engage in the cycle of abuse. So it's in all of our lives in one way or another, even if we might not know it. The other reason I'm so passionate about this topic is I'm Jasmine, but I could have easily been Jennifer. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Jackie. Timer, can we have a minute, please? Please give Jackie your feedback in the chat.
1 minute coming up.
Thank you.
One minute.
Thank you, Timer. Please wrap up your comments. I love words, but I can honestly say I have not heard of good word, Vicki. And we've already had some people use it. You will now get a chance to use it on your own because we are into the portion of the program of table topics. Our table topics master tonight is Ron Slaybaugh. Take it away.
Thank you, Eric. This is the third time in a row that I've had a role at one of these meetings, and I'm wondering what's up, Lloyd. Normally you've given me one on, one off, and I was two on. I figured I'd get a reprieve this time, but nope, not only did you select me for a role, but pretty significant role at that. And I'll admit that with the topic of pandemic fatigue, I had a tough time coming up with some topics that I can ask people, because this isn't a real joyful topic, is it? It's something that we all get down, and by definition, fatigue is something that brings us down. And then Jackie, I have to follow your presentation, and you did a great job on your delivery to try to liven that up, but it isn't something that left me feeling really strong and energized and happy to take on this role of table topics master. Now that's not on you. You had a job to do, and you did it, and you did it very well. But now I have a job to do following you, and I got to be honest, I'm not looking entirely forward to that. So before I get started, though, we do have a few folks here that I'm not familiar with. Now, Cynthia, I don't think we've ever met. And I feel that given that you are a DTM, I can probably ask you to do a table topic, and that'll be okay. I'm thinking you're not going to be too nervous in front of this group. The other two, would that be okay? Cynthia?
Yes, I'm fine with doing table topics.
All right, I figured as much. And the other two, and I apologize if I have met you when Dean and Joe, would you be interested in a table topic if I happen to ask you one?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
I've been in Toastmasters a long time, just not at the meetings very often.
Okay, good. Well, nice to see you. How about you, Joe? Same thing?
Yeah, this is my first Toastmasters meeting, and since Jackie's my niece, I wanted to hear her speak, and since Lloyd's a good friend of mine, sure.
Okay. Well, we'll see if we get to you. And normally we've had one speech, and that has left ample time for table topics. And since we've had two, we're a little bit later in the agenda than normal. So we'll see how things go. So Cynthia, I think I will start with you. And I'd like to start off somewhat happy. I mean, with the somewhat happy question. Granted, we can all get down about the various things that has impacted our life with COVID, with the pandemic. Is there something that you have done or that you've seen others do, say, to make lemonade out of those lemons?
Thank you for the interesting question, Table Topic Master Ron. Is there something that I've seen or I have done to make lemons out of this pandemic? I would say definitely, because we are not able to travel anymore, at least because traveling from state to state or even intrastate can cause problems for vulnerable people. Using methods like Zoom or GoToMeeting, FaceTime, Facebook Live has been a great advantage for people, especially for myself. Using this method for visiting and going places has made it so I am not confined and isolated. I don't worry so much about suffering from pandemic fatigue because I have been I'm sorry, I'm not pronouncing it right, but I have been carefree in my attitude for how I use Zoom in visiting other clubs, in conducting my book club meeting, and in general, just for getting around and doing some of the things I did face to face.
like going to concerts. I'm able to see some productions that have been shown online. So this has impacted me, but not to the point where it has stymied me completely. So I turn it back over to you, Mr. Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Cynthia. I couldn't agree with you more. I had never participated in a Zoom meeting until our first one with Cascade Speakeasy. Hadn't had much success with Skype, and we use that platform at work. I've been successful in a couple of dozen Skype meetings now, use Microsoft Teams. So there are a few things that I'll have to admit are positives coming out of this. Learned how to work from home, certainly. Never thought that that would be a reality, and it is. I could certainly get used to it, and I could really get used to the from home part, but there's that work that has to go with it. And I imagine that I'm seeing the responses. I'm certainly not alone. Lloyd, next one's for you, being a retired school teacher. I've run across not just one, but a number of people that pretend to be experts in what's going on with the coronavirus, with the comments of, well, it's just the flu, or it'll burn itself out by summer. Well, it's summer and we're 50, 60, 70,000 cases a day. I'm pretty confident, unless that's all a hoax, it isn't burning itself out. I had one individual come up to me because I have an engineering background. He says, "You're into percentages, right? Math." I said, "Yeah, I'm into math." And this was early on. And he said, "Well, if you take the number of deaths divided by the number of cases," and he got out his phone and he ran that math for me. He said, "Look at that, it's only 0.05%. And I said, "Well, that's fine and good, except for to complete that math, you have to multiply that number by 100. So that takes it up to 5. This isn't the only example, there'd be plenty. And I do have some fatigue over listening to the various armchair COVID experts out there. What guidance could you provide for folks like me? Because I am seeing plenty of nods in the crowd here. That sounds like they're hearing the same thing. What guidance would you have for me in listening or dealing with folks like this?"
Thank you, Ron. I think what you're getting at, if I understand you correctly, is that in a sense, the numerical analysis we all hear is becoming overwhelming. And it's possible to look at some of those numbers in more than one way, which creates confusion. Is this a big deal or is it not? Well, it sure is hell a big deal for the people who have ended up dead, but in any event, there is one number that I think is worth thinking about, and it's pretty easy to grasp that number too, and that is the percentage of tests which are positive, not the number, but the percentage. And 3 or 4 weeks ago here in Chelan Douglas County, it was about 2%, and right now it's up to about 11%. Now, what that shows is that regardless of how many people are being tested, how many people are in the hospital, whatever, the epidemic is apparently getting worse. That is, of the people being tested, there are more of them sick than used to be sick. That's an issue, especially since there is no vaccine and there will not be a vaccine probably until at least late this year, more likely into next year. And then on top of that, we are at what's called an inflection point. It's kind of a tipping point. And if the spread of the epidemic becomes exponential as opposed to linear like it is now, we could easily see tens of millions of cases by this time next year and maybe hundreds of thousands dead. We're at a point where something's got to be done, all right. But it doesn't help to have the people who you are talking about, Ron, who are suggesting, well, it's not that big a deal because only 130,000 have died, or only some tiny fraction of a percent are sick. It has impacts, and we're going to be dealing with it for a long, long time. Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Lloyd. Appreciate it. Good analysis there. Next up, Kathleen. See you smiling there, and you don't have a speaking role. I work for an employer where we wear masks. I work for Slam PUD. We have a fair amount of employees, and we wear masks to protect others from ourselves if we happen to be infected. I've actually been wearing my mask going on 6 weeks now. I was an early adopter, and it was interesting that I walked into a meeting with my mask on. I was the only one. It wasn't required, and got some interesting looks from folks. I did hear one comment somewhat under this breath that we're going to have to hose Ron off before he leaves, which just goes on to that individual clearly didn't understand why I was wearing that mask. Nonetheless, I stuck to my guns. But I'll admit, it is getting somewhat tiring. I was sitting in my office the other day and I ate an orange and I had that orange juice on my hand. It's like, darn, I need to go rinse this off in the bathroom. But I don't have my mask on, but I couldn't eat my orange with a mask. That's a bit of a conundrum. And of course, if I'm in meetings and talking a lot, I find it somewhat difficult to breathe through the mask. And just putting it on, taking it off, putting it on, taking it off. I'm not going to say that I would consider it pandemic fatigue, but it does get a little bit tiring. I'm completely on board, but nonetheless, it's getting tiring. What guidance could you give for me? Because again, I know that I'm not alone in how I'm feeling about this.
Thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master. That is a great question. I happen to love my mask. I have quite a few of them. You may have noticed at the beginning of the meeting, I leave them tied around my neck. They accent, I choose them to match my clothing. They accent what I'm wearing. I just leave them hanging here. Sometimes I use them for a headband to keep my hair out of my face. I'm confident that that breaks all the rules to keep them clean, however. I like it. It also hides the features of my face that I like the least. I find that to be a big advantage. I don't have to put much makeup on. Doesn't matter if I leave the lipstick at home. I just put my mask on. I've had a great time. I was at a healthcare center the other day where there were some triplets next to me that were preschool age. They all had their masks on. Their mom and dad had their masks on. We had a great conversation with the triplets about masks and what was the mask, what was on their mask. And I happened to have horses on my mask, and they thought that that was very cool because they wanted to go horseback riding. And I think there's just a matter of socializing the masks. I was just at Fred Meyer. I would say that mask wearing was close to 100%, which I've never seen at Fred Meyer. I think that we're winning the mask battle. And part of the tipping point is making it kind of cool and kind of fun and something that we can base a rhythmia feeling on. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Kathleen. Well, it's 1/4 the hour and we have 2 speech evaluations to get through. Should we call it good? Should we wrap it up? Yeah?
Yep.
All righty. Well, thank you everyone that participated, and I will turn it back over to our Toastmaster.
Thank you, Ron, Topics Master. I will hand it off to our general evaluator, Rob Tidd.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to turn my attention to my crack team. I'm going to start with our first evaluation. Christina, are you ready? Please welcome back Christina Stepper.
Thank you, Rob. Pat, I very much enjoyed your speech. It was not rhythmiatic, which I typed in and all that came up was arithmetic. So apparently my phone does not understand the word. Outstanding parts of your speech, your eye contact, you managed to use gestures in spite of the Zoom forum. defining acronyms for us, and Zapati Ngala introducing us to the phrase and showing it to us physically was great. Your facts and information, good vocal variety. I especially liked your passion for this subject. It was very evident that this is near and dear to your heart, a concern of yours. As a result, you've made it a concern of ours too. Very good job with that. A couple things to work on. It was evident that your notes were to your right. Your vision went to your right a number of times as you were reading and referring to your notes. You might consider, if you can, if there's space, to back away from your computer more so that your notes maybe could be on your keyboard or more directly in front of you. That would also give you an opportunity to use gestures a little bit more if you're not quite so close to your computer. To challenge yourself, could you incorporate a story, even if you made it up, about someone's experience under the old system of education compared to a child now? Maybe at their high school graduation, one's ready to go into a professional career, the other is barely literate or needing remedial programs when they get to school. Just something to bring more story into this very intense, informative talk. That said, great talk, great information, great passion, well presented, well organized. I very much enjoyed it. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Christina. At this point in time, I would like to invite our second evaluator, Ian, who evaluated Jackie Graybill's speech. Please welcome back Ian Adam. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Evaluator. Jackie, I'm going to start out with the bad tonight. You slightly tongue-twisted one word. That was it. That's all. That's it for the extent of the bad. This speech was fantastic. In your email to me, you highlighted the fact, in fact, I'll read it. It says, "Well, I'll give my first Zoom speech, exclamation mark." You could have fooled us all. You did your homework. I think that what you've done, it seems, is watched several others give speeches on Zoom, and you've picked all of the best parts of their speeches and adopted that into your speech. You stood up. You were back far enough from the camera that we could see the majority of your upper torso and all of your hand gestures. Getting into hand gestures, they were great, spot on. One of your first hand gestures that I really took note of was when you talked about the honeymoon phase. And not only did that circular motion with your hand represent the curvature of a moon, it also was representative of a rotating cycle. So you managed to get a combination of thoughts across in one hand gesture. Really great. Vocal variety was also spot on. You slowed down where you needed to. You had some great pauses. There was one point that you said, I didn't write the whole sentence down, but you said, in an independent way. And you had what I would consider as the absolute perfect pause length before you started moving on to the next sentence. I write down your speech started off talking about two women who appear to be very rhythmic. I think that's how I would pronounce it. Like Christina, I also quickly got on my phone and tried to find different variations of the word rhythmia, and I couldn't find anything. Rhythmic was the only thing that came up. So I invented my own conjugation of the word rhythmic. They were also appeared to be very joyful. They were at a St. Louis convention of sorts. They were there for board games. What could be more fun than a convention about board games? It's all about fun. And suddenly we nosedived into a very depressing story of abuse. Never saw that coming. That was a really great way to lead into a depressing topic, because it piqued our interest right off the bat. We were very interested in this couple of women that they're on this trip having a great time. So you blindsided us by the fact that we were going to be listening to a story about abuse, a horrible thing that takes place every day in this world. I was looking at the audience. One of the purposes of the speech was presentation mastery. You nailed that. The audience was engaged. You proved that by the fact that you asked us a question, and there was folks in the audience that raised their hand in agreement with your question that you had answered. You also used the word of the day twice. Nice job on that. And you used it correctly both times. Lastly, you left us filled with emotion. The last statement, "I'm Jasmine," just gave me chills. It filled us with emotion. And to use some words that Christine just did on her speech review, you made this concern a concern of ours. You did exactly what you should have done in this speech. You fully engaged the audience. You made us feel emotion, left us with wondering more. And I would hope that at least some of us in this group are going to think about the things that you said tonight and try and recognize maybe people that are in our lives, the 1 in 5 people that you say are experiencing abuse, and see if there's a way that we can help those folks out. Excellent job. I couldn't ask for a better speech. It was like you were a professional motivational speaker. Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, I would at this point like to invite back for our timing this evening. Please welcome back Joyce Matheson.
I'm back. Where shall I start? Let's start with the prepared speeches. Pat, you had 8 minutes, 42 seconds, but I loved every moment of it. Jackie, 7 minutes, 34 seconds. Like I said, I got chills too. And it's hard to hold a timer and not cry. I would like you to know. Let's go to the evaluations. Christina, you had 2 minutes, 55 seconds. Ian, 4 minutes, 42 seconds, but there was a lot of information there, so I would forgive you. As for the table topics, Cynthia, 1 minute, 52 seconds. Lloyd, 2 minutes, 4 seconds. And Kathleen, 2 minutes and 9 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. And now I would like to turn to our rhythmiac, who is going to give us her grammarian report. Please welcome back Vicki Chatterton.
Thank you very much. I like how people are getting creative with this word and coming up with their own phrases of it. Christina, you came up with one. Ian and Rob, you did also. Kathleen used it. Cynthia used it. Jackie used it twice. And Pat taught us a new phrase so that we were also learning new phrases of Zapatia Ingalia. Did I get it correct? I want to make sure.
Ingali.
Ingali. Okay. And then Jackie also gave us some words or phrases such as love bombing and gaslighting. And so we got a rich vocabulary tonight. And it's interesting with Zoom. Sometimes I can, as the moderator, unmute people and not mute people. and I wasn't able to unmute Jackie, and I knew that she was prepared for a speech, and I was kept trying to do it. So, but Jackie, you did a great job. It didn't phase you one bit, and you used the word, which just amazes me when you have a prepared speech and can use the word of the day. So, bravo.
Well done, Vicki. Thank you. And last but not least, we're going to find out how we did with those filler words. Please welcome back to the podium, Mary Syrie.
Thank you, Rob. I have 4 people who had no filler sounds, no filler words, and that's Ian, Christina, Joyce, and Kathleen. All in all, it was a pretty clean evening, though. Nobody went over the top or, you know, didn't have to call in the mercy rule on anybody. Eric just had one sound, and I'm just going to say sound, not or blah blah blah. It's one sound. Rob had a well, and I wrote down a cliche at this point in time. You could, it's sort of a filler. You could make it more interesting. And then you had use of okay. Vicki just had one sound, and you repeated as well as, use that a lot. Pat, you just had a few, and actually so kind of, and a few ands in your speech. Jackie had 3 ands and a couple so's that were superfluous. Joe's still here in your acceptance of doing a table topics. You had 5 sounds, like an or and ah. Cynthia, 2 sounds and a so. Lloyd, just 1 sound and now, and kind of. Ron Slaybaugh, a couple sounds and a but, now, it, and alrighty. I just wrote that because it sounds funny coming out of you. Alrighty. That's my report.
Great. Thank you, Mary. So my role as the general evaluator is to evaluate the speech evaluators and to evaluate the meeting as a whole. Tonight we had 2 very powerful speeches. They really touched my soul, and I know that they touched the evaluators because the evaluators came back with some very in-depth critiques and very positive criticism, of which there was very little. So I was very impressed with not only the speeches, but the evaluators. I also wanted to comment on the table topics master. Ron, you do a fantastic job with the table topics, to the point that your intro for the questions are as long as some of the speeches. And I was waiting for Joyce to start timing you on your introductions. I'm only saying that in jest because really you do a fantastic job with that. At this point in time, goodness, I keep doing that. I think the meeting as a whole was well run. It was professional. No one missed a beat. Everyone was on cue. Everyone did a terrific job. I can't suggest any particular thing that we would have had to have done differently to make this less of a meeting than it was tonight. So I just want to say congratulations to everyone in the roles that they performed, the speeches that were given, and the evaluations that resulted from those speeches. Well done, everyone. Thank you. At this point in time, I would like to turn the meeting back over to our baseball guru. Please welcome back our president, Ian Adams. Ian?
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. I mentioned earlier on this evening that I had a funny, interesting story about baseball. We'll just call him father-in-law. It's not official yet. And I should say that because my wife's parents are divorced, and her mom has found a new interest. And this new interest is an ex-professional baseball player. He played for the Chieftains. I don't recall the city that the Chieftains were from, for the years 1976, 77, and 78. And last night I was looking to try and find a baseball card on eBay for him. He showed me a picture of one that he had on his phone, a snapshot, and I was going to give it to my kids to have him autograph the baseball card for him. And this is after he had brought my kids over a baseball bat, a t-ball stand, and a ball last night. So they were outside playing baseball, and I had a great time watching my son smack that ball around the yard. He had, obviously was having more fun than I was, but I loved it nonetheless. Great evaluation of us tonight, Mr. Evaluator. You should everybody here should be proud of themselves for the jobs they've done. And I appreciate our general evaluator's recognition of that. Is there any comments?
Yes, Ian, at this time, it might be appropriate for everyone to vote for the speech of the evening. And if you would like, if everyone would like to direct their vote to me, I'd be happy to tally those votes.
Thanks, Rob.
Ian, it would be nice to hear from our two guests about their experience tonight, or if they could want to share anything else.
Yeah, how about some words from our guests? Would anybody like to have anything to say?
I enjoyed the meeting and the collaboration between the two clubs. I think it was well orchestrated, very professional, enlightening. I love the speeches, and I'm glad I was able to visit tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anybody else?
This is my first Toastmasters meeting, and I've enjoyed that. I understand that any movement, any sound, I'm evaluated on, so I will be careful. Thank you very much. And the word of the day, rhythmia, if I pronounce that correctly, is appropriate for how I felt tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Lloyd, any comments from the education side of things?
Yeah, there's something good happening this Friday. Both of our clubs got the right number of officers to the club officer training a few weeks ago. But for those of you who did not make it, Division D has set up a makeup club officer training for this coming Friday night. That's a big deal for them to do that, and it would be a good idea for those who did not make the original club officer training here in our district to get there. I'll send out the link to that tomorrow.
Thanks, Lloyd. Rob, do we have a speech winner tonight?
We do, Mr. President. 2 people received votes this evening, and the winner was Jackie Graybill. Welcome, Jackie. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Jackie. You definitely deserved it. Thanks, everybody. At this point, we're a little bit over time, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting adjourned, and we'll see everybody next week. Thanks to our guests for showing up. We hope to see you again soon.
Join us again. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Bye now.
Bye.